Hello and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide Chamber of Commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we like to focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and our state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, the president and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. And today I'm in Portland talking with Maria Pope, President and CEO of Portland General Electric, or, to most of us, PGE. Based in Portland, PGE has provided power to Oregonians for more than 130 years. PGE's service area includes many of Oregon's most economically significant areas, including Multnomah County, as well as the Silicon Forest, as some call it, in Washington County. It's also a big employer in its own right, with roughly 2,900 employees. All that is to say that PGE plays a large and long-standing and important role in Oregon's economy. So Maria, I'm really looking forward to talking with you today about the company, the critical work that it does, and thank you for joining me.
Angela, thank you.
Great. Well, why don't we just kick off with the basics? Share a little bit about PGE with our listeners. I mean, I touched on some of the statistics, but tell us a little more about customers, service area, et cetera.
Sure. So Portland General is one of the largest utilities in the Pacific Northwest, as you noted. We're also one of the fastest growing. We generate power in Oregon, Washington, and Montana, and we serve most of the large employers in the state, and actually about 3/4 of the state's industrial and commercial activity. About a third of our customers are residential customers, or I should say a third of our energy is sold to residential customers. A third goes to business and commercial customers. And then a third goes to large industrial customers, of which, it's a hot topic right now, but about half of that, or about 14%, serves data centers.
Okay, that's interesting. That's quite a mix. I think a lot of people just reading the headlines might think it was a different mix than what you just outlined. So thank you.
Most people think it is much larger.
Yeah, thank you for rooting us in that. So I want to stick with the basics for the next question as well. And I know you and you know this industry better than anyone, so you could probably go pretty deep in the weeds on this, but let's keep it a little bit high level. But Oregonians are served by various types of utilities. Some are, like PGE, investor-owned utilities. And there's a mix, and that's important, I think, in the context of the energy conversation landscape that we'll get into later. But can you just explain to listeners a little bit about the overall landscape and maybe the role that an investor-owned utility or IOU plays in that landscape?
Sure. As you noted, we're about 130 years old, and so much of the way we are organized today in terms of energy infrastructure, particularly electricity, really goes back to almost that full set of history. So if we think first and foremost, we've got the federal entity, or Bonneville Power Administration, and as well as a number of public utility districts, co-ops, and municipal utilities. BPA operates much of the transmission system, much of the hydro in the region, particularly on the Columbia River, and is an extension of the U.S. Department of Energy.
Okay.
The PUDs, co-ops, and munis, they actually are, almost all of them just distribute energy. So think of a line center, folks, trucks, repair, dispatch, the kinds of activities. And they pretty much all get their power from Bonneville Power Administration. The investor-owned utilities, and if you think sort of across the Pacific Northwest, ourselves are no different than PacifiCorp, Puget Sound Energy, or Vista in Washington, or Idaho Power in Idaho. And what we do is we bring large-scale capital to essentially a public good, or the energy ecosystem of this region. And that is because we have access to capital markets, both equity capital, debt capital, but also something that's really important, and increasingly so, is insurance capital and collateral. And so we exist, again, as I mentioned, to bring this large-scale capital to a public good, safe, reliable service at scale. And we, as investor-owned utilities, we own a lot of power generation, we own a lot of transmission, and certainly we own a lot of distribution assets. We actually serve most of the individuals in the Pacific Northwest. And as an example, Portland General has about $16 billion of assets. And so we bring that capital strength to not just our customers, but to the entire region. As I noted, we serve the largest industries in Oregon in particular.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I don't think it's something, I mean, most of us, when we flip on a switch at home or at work, we don't really think about it. But you're right, the capital intensive nature of this, the infrastructure that goes into a safe, reliable grid, if you will, is complicated, expensive, and completely interconnected. That's how it works. And you're right. I don't think many of us think about, like, we pay our bill for what gets delivered to us as the end user, but how that gets generated and transmitted would require some entities like yours that could be in that hybrid space where you can raise the capital to do that.
Yes, we're really designed to deploy, quite significant sums of capital at the lowest energy cost for customers. And one of the things I think that's also really interesting, you talked about this interconnectedness. One of the things we also do is we work west-wide from New Mexico and through Arizona, Utah, Nevada, all the way up to British Columbia to ensure that we have the lowest cost energy for customers. And essentially think of it like an electron clearinghouse. Or if you think of like the Western power pool market, it's essentially like an insurance mutual for utilities. And so we work independently, we work cooperatively, and we're all interconnected to ensure that the entire region is served with the lowest possible cost and the most reliably.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. So let's talk about where the electricity comes from. PGE is widely known, at least in the industry. I don't know if the public knows it, but that's part of what we're doing here. PGE is an industry leader in renewable energy sources, including hydro and solar, wind. You recently closed the coal-fired Boardman plant in 2020, I believe, and replaced that capacity with cleaner natural gas as an input. So what is the current mix? How does it continue to evolve? And how does that mix, how does your company think about its role in a more sustainable future?
Sure. So first of all, we've been at this for a long time. The clean energy mix we have, which is roughly about 46%, has been built up over a number of years and billions of dollars of investment. One of the things I want to make sure of that our customers recognize is that it's really important that we deliver power at the lowest possible cost. And so we have really leaned in to federal tax credits and to federal grants. In fact, over $2 billion worth of production tax credits and investment tax credits have gone into energy infrastructure in Oregon that directly reduces customer prices, but creates great investment for the different counties in which we've invested. We've also had over $250 million in grants. But today we rely significantly on the hydro system. We have our own hydro that we partner with the Confederate Tribes of the Warm Springs on the Deschutes. We also operate facilities on the Clackamas. We buy hydro from out the region as well. We have about 25% wind and solar.
Oh, interesting.
It's rapidly increasing, in particular solar. And we also have a lot of battery storage. So we have really leaned in, given that we are focused on clean energy, into technology because we need to stay reliable. And so we have about 1 gigawatt of battery storage, which is enough for about 300,000 homes for about 4 hours on critical peak days. It makes a big difference to the stability for our customers and for the entire region.
Yeah, I think it's something, again, it's not out front and center for customers to think about all that R&D and innovation that companies are doing constantly to evolve. And often, and we'll come back to this maybe a little bit, but often I think people forget that companies do that proactively before they're told they have to because of a statute or a regulation. They do it because it's the right thing to do for their customers. and the environment. And so there's my little soapbox for a second as I digress. But I just think it's important for people to realize that a lot of companies are making these investments proactively, voluntarily, creatively, and with significant resources.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to reflecting the values of our customers. And not only are our customers interested in clean energy, from the smallest customers to the largest customers, we have the largest voluntary clean energy program in the country. And we also rely heavily on technology. We are in between all the high-tech companies in Washington State and all of the startups in Silicon Valley. And so we get the best of both ecosystems, and we work with a number of large tech companies as partners, but also small startups who have really brought us innovation at scale that has already been deployed to benefit customers.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, you mentioned Washington, so I want to take a second to ask you about this. In February, PGE announced the acquisition of some substantial generation, transmission, and operations in Washington state. I think it's a few natural gas plants, some wind, which you mentioned is as part of your portfolio, and thousands of miles of transmission and distribution. Tell us a little more about that. What role does that play in the company's growth and development?
Sure. So first of all, it's about thoughtful growth. It's about a $1.9 billion acquisition, and it will help us be more diverse, be more focused on different regions in the area, and we will increase our asset scale, our number of customers by about 20%. There's no question that being in two states is better than being in one, but we're in two states that have very similar philosophies and very similar environments and focus areas for their utilities. So it's extremely complementary. And so far, we're just extremely pleased with the stakeholder response. I couldn't be more excited about the community leader response we've seen, the commissioner and regulator response, the response of customers both in Oregon and in Washington, as well as our shareholders. And it creates great opportunities for our employees as well.
Oh, yeah, good point. And we'll come back. I want to talk about employees a little bit more. But I want to talk a little bit about something that is on a lot of people's minds, both residential customers and industrial and business customers, which is affordability and the costs of basically everything. We see costs going up, and electricity is no exception to that. What are the primary cost drivers of electricity in Oregon now, and do they differ in meaningful ways from, say, Washington or other parts of the United States?
Yes, that's a really great question. So first of all, we are impacted by the same inflationary issues that are impacting the entire economy. Over the last 5 years, about 50% or more of our cost increases have also come from extreme weather, namely wildfire prevention and insurance costs. Some of this is due to restoration, but a lot of it is due to system hardening and investment. And a new transformer costs twice as much as a transformer cost 5 or 10 years ago. About 30% of our increases come actually from higher taxes, energy efficiency through the Energy Trust of Oregon, as well as other policy choices. And those are different than what other states are experiencing.
Can you say that number one more time?
About 30%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it's some of that relates to the increase in infrastructure we have in the state, but a lot of it relates to higher rights-of-way focus, as well as some of the policy choices that we make here in Oregon. The remaining balance comes from power costs, and overall, as I noted, clean energy investments come with federal tax credits, and those actually offset customer prices. And so we actually brought a wind farm online just a couple of years ago that actually lowered customer prices by about 1.7%. So it's not clean energy which most people think it is, because of the significance of the 30, 40, or 50% tax credits. We also have a philosophy, and have long had a philosophy, that growth pays for growth. And so our largest customers are actually paying the most, And now, even with some of the recent legislation and policy changes that are being implemented by the Public Utility Commission, we'll see, specifically data center customer prices go up quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. A lot of people would, it is a little counterintuitive. I think a lot of people instinctively would think, that utility is spending a lot of my money as a customer on the clean tech investments. But you're right, there are a lot of offsets and things that make that worthwhile. And then, of course, there are economies of scale when you're talking about an infrastructure-heavy business like this. But you mentioned it, so we're going to go there. Let's talk data centers for another second, if we can. Your service area includes Washington County and other areas in the region that are known globally for the semiconductor industry and, in fact, data centers. And data centers have become very top of mind for a lot. They're very controversial now. They're coming up in political campaigns. They're coming up in policy debates, in part because they consume a lot of energy and are blamed for driving up electricity costs. So could you just unpack for people a little more? And by the way, I said unpack, which is a shout out. I have to shout out to my mom, who's probably the only person consistently listening to this podcast, but she notes I say unpack a lot, and I just did it again. I can't help it. So that one was for Gail. But can you just help us understand a little more about data centers and where they fit in the ecosystem of electricity usage and pricing?
Sure. So first of all, let me also unpack for you a little bit, no pun intended, how utilities operate in that we serve everyone in our area. We don't discriminate. We don't choose customers. We're here to serve customers how and when they want and where they need electricity. We have long supported the semiconductor industry. They have very high reliability needs, given the nature of their infrastructure and how they manufacture. We also serve many of the hospitals in the region, as well as many other industries, some of whom have actually the opposite requirements of some other industries. So it's very important that we serve everyone where they are and how they want to be served. And as I noted, growth pays for growth. Residential or small business customers are not subsidizing data centers. And next week, data centers will be seeing a 29% price increase, which actually reduces customer prices immediately and is expected to further offset customer prices for residential and small businesses as we move forward in the coming years. So I think we can see that data centers actually are supporting the energy ecosystem of the region and already have contributed to reliability as we use their backup generation and can, in some instances, turn them off during peak periods and others. So they're an integral part of the reliability of the energy ecosystem and have been for a number of years.
Yeah, I thank you for that, because I'll admit I didn't know the specifics, but I think it's important because we do get a lot of information, especially in a political year, a campaign year, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about who's paying for them and how that works. So I appreciate that. So let's come back to the company a little bit. Thank you for walking us through some of the elements of what you do and how you do it. But one of the things I think that probably surprises people about PGE, because again, you sort of operate there in the background reliably and we don't have to think about the company so much, but there's a lot of people that make that work. And PGE provides a lot of jobs, really good jobs. And so talk a little bit about your employee base, including maybe average salary and some of those things that customers or other people in the region just might not understand.
Sure. So first, you're right. We have great family wage jobs. From our folks on the front lines to our engineers to control room operators, we employ an incredibly diverse type of workforce. And utility work pays about 77% above the state average. So these are really good paying jobs. We work hand in hand with IBW Local 125 on recruitment, retention, and training. We do extensive training. We also, between contractors, suppliers, and others, we support about 10,000 jobs across the state, even though you noted we have about 2,900 employees here. So that adds up to about $920 million of total labor income for Oregon. Additionally, we pay about $350 million in taxes, rights-of-way fees to local states and government. Actually, because of all the federal incentives, we don't pay much in federal taxes. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is our PGE Foundation, and importantly, the spirit of volunteerism and caring for our state. About 2/3 of our employees give their time and their treasure to supporting local communities. And so being there for one another, whether it is in bad storms when we're restoring the power, or whether it is supporting social enterprises, being here for our communities is really important and core to who we are as Portland General.
Oh, that's great. And it's nice that workers can receive that ethos from headquarters all the way throughout the region. And you guys were kind enough to invite us to see the training facility in Sherwood as part of our manufacturing and innovation roadshow one year, and it's so cool. It's really incredible to see the training and the education, and really I think what was striking to a lot of us too was the enthusiasm that the trainees had for what they were embarking on and what they were going to get to do once they were ready to go.
And I'd say it's even our long-term employees who were there training the future generations. They take enormous pride in that facility. They designed it. And they really take a lot of pride in the next generation that comes up and ensuring that everyone who comes in contact with our system, who works at our company, it takes safety at the most important and highest level.
So I want to talk a little bit because it's hard for me to do a podcast episode without talking about regulation in some way. So I'm gonna do it here. Utilities are among the most heavily regulated businesses, regardless of where they are, federally, locally, state level for sure. PGE happens to operate in Oregon, which, our studies have shown is a more heavily regulated state than most. So share with us a little bit about ways the state might create some challenges. Maybe, we refer to them as unnecessary obstacles to success. And so how do you see those manifest in your industry here in Oregon?
Sure. So first, I think as you noted, it's really important to remember that we operate in a broader national ecosystem, and that like our customers or residents of the state, capital has choices. And we don't need to really recreate everything in Oregon from scratch. We can look to examples in other states and copy or take a look at what's working really well. We at PGE, we benchmark all the time, and we replicate best examples across our industry, especially as it relates to technology, much of the work we're doing around automation, around AI. We are quick adopters of best practices. I think also from a state perspective that we can rely on the ecosystem of regulators that exist in our country. So for example, in our industry, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, regulates interstate transmission. EPA, environmental issues. The SEC, governance and financial integrity. Even credit agencies, Moody's and S&P, essentially regulate credit metrics, balance sheets, cash flow. And so I don't think we don't have to do everything. And sometimes we, in our enthusiasm for our regulation, we get detailed beyond the ability to act nimbly. And so I think if you look at the governor's prosperity report, we would agree that we could really be a lot more effective in Oregon if we were really outcomes focused rather than all of the nitty details and sometimes over prescriptions that we end up with.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point and something that, our wheelhouse is state level policy, as you know, but there's federal regulations, there's state regulations, there's local regulations, and I do think it's easy for policymakers at each of those levels to forget that the other level exists. So they add their thing, forgetting that their thing is not only one in that vertical ladder, but one thing in the horizontal ladder among, the variety of state agencies or whatever. And so that compounding effect of regulation is really serious, and it's something that well-intentioned policymakers aren't thinking about because they're in their narrow lane.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing I think that's interesting about what you mentioned, I have a colleague in Washington who refers to this as R&D, which is rip off and duplicate. When somebody's doing it well, yeah, do that. Just copy what they're doing. We don't have to always be the first.
I like that term. I'll use that in the future, Angela.
He'll know it was him if he ever hears you say it. But yeah, we don't always have to be the first, the best, the only, the most. Sometimes just doing it well is more important than putting some unique stamp on it. And I think we've lost a little bit of sight of that. And we'll see what happens with the Prosperity Council recommendations for sure. Well, what are some, as we come to a close, what are some things that you wish policymakers and Oregonians knew about your business that we haven't discussed and that they probably don't realize?
Sure. That's a great question. I think, and probably, a great way to close. I think first, that the future of Oregon's economy is tied directly to how we invest in energy today. I think second, at PGE, I mentioned this before, we reflect the values of our customers and the values of our communities that we serve. Safe, reliable, affordable energy. We're all aligned. And then third, I'm really lucky. I work with the greatest group of colleagues. We show up every day to do our best for the region and for Oregon. We bring an extraordinary amount of talent and expertise, representing the best of the industry for our customers and for the state.
That's great. Very well said. So thank you for what you do. I know it's the start of summer now officially, and I guess also unofficially with the holidays behind us, and we're heading into some of the hot months in Oregon, and that always creates unique challenges for you. So I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of your frontline workers who are going to be out there. They're out there in the winter when the ice storms hit, and they're out there all year long, but especially in the summer when you're at peak loads and people need that important and reliable power to stay cool and safe. So thank you to all of those folks that make the system work every day.
Thank you. They're remarkable and they really care.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before I let you go?
I want to thank you for including me in your podcast. It's been great fun, and your questions and the discussion has been terrific. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your time. And listeners,
and thank you for your leadership across the state, Angela.
Oh, gosh, my pleasure. I get to do it because folks like you trust us to do it, and our team is like you. I have a great team, and we're proud to be able to represent the state's business community in some of those policy discussions. So thank you again, Maria Pope, President and CEO of PGE, for joining us today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. The Oregon Business Matters podcast is a production of Oregon Business and Industry, and our episodes can be found on all of the top podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. So please check them out, follow, subscribe, and share. And for more information about OBI, please visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.